you know, we're out here giving out our first lesson in finance. Probably going to be pretty mediocre, but, nothing wrong with mediocre. Just going to go into basically three main things that I think are very important for the fundamentals of like how you see money and growing it, and what kind of affects how we should make our decisions about it in the investing world, at least. Not going to get into you spending money, too much money out to eat or anything like that, but basically I want to talk about three principles. First thing I want to start with is the time value of money, and as well as inflation. And then I'm going to go into what those instruments look like for investing and like trying to actually grow your money, looking at the time value of money and how it works and everything. So anyways, let's jump into it. The first thing to think about is time value of money. So when we say that, what we mean in finance is that what can you buy with today's dollars tomorrow? And I like to use Investopedia. I think it's a great resource for getting explanations on what things mean. Check it out sometime. Don't, whatever. But, I think it's super helpful for resource. Anyways, time value of money. Time value of money is a concept that the sum of money is worth more now than the sum will be worth at a future date due to its earnings potential in the interim. And so, like, there's a couple things that go into this, but one thing I think of is so principle in money in general is like tomorrow's money is never realistically, I guess it can be, but like you're always going to see inflation. Like money just kind of goes down in value every single day. Your dollar today is going to buy less tomorrow because it's always being inflated. There are deflation stuff. We're not going to get into too crazy economics. But in general, money's inflating. 2% is the target right now. It's at like 3, probably higher. I'm not going to reference anything, but when your money's inflating, that means that the basket of goods that you bought, they have a certain measure. Some call it CPI, some call it PCE. That is a good measure, depending on who you ask, of economic indicators for how our money's being inflated. But anyways, that's the key principle. If you put your money under a mattress, it is not going to be worth more tomorrow, right? You're going to lose value on it over time. So that's why we have to think about, okay, well, how do we make our money grow? We put it into things that make us more money. So this is where time value of money comes into play. What you're thinking about is how can I figure out how to increase my present value of money to the future. And so what we do is we think about interest rates on loaning our money. That's one way to increase our net worth, or our wealth, really. Both. Anyways, what you're looking at when you think about the time value of money is how can I find out how much to make in the future. Getting a little stumbled on that part. So what you're thinking about is how much of my dollars today times whatever the interest rate is for loaning my money out will I have in future values based off the compounding periods. So like how many times in an annual year, that's what everything's based off of, 365 days a year. There's some 360, that's also fine. Not going to be a huge difference. But basically like you use one year as a time period. So like sometimes things compound 4 times, 6 times, 2 times in a year. But what I mean by that is that they're getting paid out. So I shouldn't say compounded. I should say they're getting distributed. They pay you money sometimes once a year, 2 times, 4 times, etc. Up to 12, realistically, no more than that. And um, there's obviously other ways that you could look at, like to grow your money. If you think about like houses, there's ways to think about the present value today and like how a house grows in value every year. Like it works in everything. But I don't want to get too complicated on day one. I just want to do like a 15-minute video and call it quits for number one lesson. And anyways, what you focus on is the fact that when you give up today's dollars, you want something in return. So that's an understood exchange, contracts agreed on. And so what you're doing is you're finding someone who needs that money today, and they're going to pay you back more in the future for that, their opportunity that they think is actually a great deal. There's always an exchange that's agreed upon when you're dealing with anything really. Like someone thinks that they're getting something that they need, and you're getting something that you need or want. Potato. So yeah, that's the general principle, right? Like, hey, I think I'm gonna run this really great ice cream shop today, and I need $100 from you. And I say, no problem, Johnny boy. Here's $100. I just want 5% interest on it. One-time annual payment is great with me. So in 1 year, hopefully the ice cream shop's booming, and you just give me my $105 because you paid me 5% one time a year. You get a little bit more in depth with it. You'll see that this is super simple math, realistically. Like if you understand exponents and the order of operations, it's really simple. Present value $100. The one is just so that it compounds. That's just like how math works. You know me explaining math. But you compound it, and then the interest over the periods. So like on this case, it would be 0.5 over 1, and that's just 0.5. And this is also explained here on Investopedia, just like in plain terms, what your variables are used for, and that's the general principle. This is a great way to figure out, like, if you put away $1,000, at 8%, and it compounds 4 times a year, it's really 0.2%, 0.02. If you do it at 8% and you divide it by 4, it would be like 0.02%, because it's, 0.0 is your decimal. Anyways, you go on to the exponents, number of periods, times number of years. So like if you're doing 4 times, let's say 10-year period, 4 times a year, like a quarterly dividend, you would see that you have 40 periods, and it would add up. And you can go look up financial calculators online and put those in, and you can basically follow those things. And we'll get to that in later lessons. Anyways, I just wanted to explain the simple principle behind the time value of money, because what you have to consider is, what should I be spending my money on today? Like, we have our wants, and that's okay. Like, if you want to go and spend your money today, and that's what you think is the best purchase of it, like if maybe the dollar is inflating so fast that you don't think you can find a good investment, it's inflating at 10%, and then you're like, dude, let's go buy everything right now because it's as cheap as it's gonna get forever, realistically, because inflation also compounds. The dollar is never going back down, probably. Let's be honest, it's impossible. Credit has ruined the bank system. Let's get into that another day. The last thing I want to talk about is just the tools in which to use, like where the principles kind of fall when we're talking about the investments that we look for, right? So, okay, we have our time value of money. What can we get in today's future? Like, what should we expect for our money? Or should we just go and spend it, right? Like those are our 2 options. There's more options, but let's keep it simple. And so where we start is the bond market, the funnest thing in the world. I know everybody loves bonds. It's probably really intimidating. It's been around forever, but realistically, the bond market and fixed incomes, securities in general, so like bonds, CDs, they're they realistically have very basic fundamentals, and so they're a lot easier to understand. Maybe not predict, but definitely understand. We won't worry about the bond market being down today. That's good. It's good for us. Won't talk about the yield curves either yet, but come back maybe in the future. What I want to talk about is the baselines. So the yields on the U.S. Treasuries are what we consider riskless assets. So when you think about letting Johnny borrow your money for 1 year, you say, hey bud, I actually got to get probably a little more than 5% because I know that without any risk at all, the U.S. government's going to pay me back at 5% on my money. And all those principles rely, like 30 years, the banks say, hey, we're not going to give you money, for your house at $300,000 if we can, at 4%, if we can just go get it from the U.S. government to let them go and just keep on spending money and, another conversation for another day. So, yeah, that's the general principle behind it, okay? This is our baseline. This is called our risk-free rate, right? The risk-free rate, and usually you see the 2 and the 10-year being referenced. Those are kind of like more accurate, like the 10-year rate. Also, I've heard the 3-month, so just kind of a little bit crazier time, but I think the 2 years probably what I like to go with. It just seems to, I've heard it's a really good indicator on a couple sources, and anyways, this is what you have to consider. Okay, well, I can go and make 5.5% on my money. That's great. CDs are also going to be similar to this, and I just wanted to kind of hop on like Fidelity really quick and show you like this is just the bond market. And this is just a general overview. These are actually, I'm pretty sure, averages, not like highs, not positive. But like you can see the 30-year, the corporate, like lowest rated corporate bonds are going to be your lowest rates. They're going to be the absolute worst, but they have to be more than the U.S. Treasury because it doesn't make any logical sense. This is different. Municipals are different because of tax-free advantages. Treasuries are not, it doesn't make any sense to give up more money if you're going to get less interest back than the U.S. Treasury. Anything, bills, notes, or bonds, whatever it is, if you're getting it from the U.S. Treasury, good as gold. Not anymore, technically, but that's also a different conversation. So many things to talk about. So even with CDs, you're like, hey, realistically, you should go get a 6-month CD from the Treasury because it's kind of FDIC. You can get into that because realistically, it's the federal government, but technically, there's no reason why anything besides municipals that have they have local tax advantages and state tax advantages, and so that's why they can give lower yields because they can actually, and those should equate to even, that just should be over the U.S. Treasury when you take in the tax advantage. Okay, so the last thing to think about is just like, okay, then if you want to do investing, that's your risk-free rate. You shouldn't take anything less than that. You can also go and just look at the stock market. When realistically, following the indices is probably some of your best options. You can diversify into sectors, whatever you want. I'd highly recommend that strategy, trying to mix it up and like get into the S&P and the NASDAQ. Maybe not today, prices are high, but eventually over time it does work out, especially if you contribute and you're trying to grow your money. That's the real point behind it. Like, inflation's attacking the money. We have to grow it. Don't leave it in your savings accounts because you're losing money without it earning more interest than inflation. And you can at least go get 5% in these things to lock up money at long periods of time. That's my 15-minute video. It's mediocre finance. And it's been real.